América from the class of 18. You are currently now at UCLA. Tell us a little bit about, give us a little bit of update on your life and what organizations you're a part of.
For sure. Well, yeah, I'm América, and I graduated in class of 2018. I am attending UCLA.
Jeanie, we'd like to thank you and welcome you. You are class of 09. Tell us what you do now.
I am a service officer at a major bank.
Paris, how do you know Mr. Ramos?
He was my advisor teacher.
I know, I miss you all. I miss you all so much.
Yeah, 9th grade to, what was that, 11th grade?
Yeah, end of first semester, 11th grade.
Sad times.
Yeah. So he thought he was going to be seeing you this week at graduation. But you've had a different
right now.
Experience than any of them.
What? Okay, both of y'all were talking at the same time, so I don't know what.
Go ahead, Oscar, say
it. You're trying to make us both cry right now, the fact that I can't be there for the graduation.
Well, nobody can. That's my point.
Because we're not having one.
My point is that Paris is part of this once-in-a-lifetime thing where they're not going to have a graduation in the traditional sense. So COVID has taken her graduation. We're still seeing what we can do with prom. But Paris, how does it feel being a senior this year?
It feels good, but at the same time, it's disappointing because of all that's going on.
Love to hear a little bit about what you've done, América. What have you been doing? Have you protested? What are you doing right now with this movement?
Currently with this movement, Ideas has been partnering up with other organizations like the Afro-Latinx Connection at UCLA, Black Student Union. We've been really like trying to bring unity and trying to make sure that UCLA is accountable for also like the police brutalities that have been happening on campus with students. So I haven't been able to protest, but I've been really involved with the conversation with the mobilization within UCLA and like defunding. We actually even have a police station on campus. So that's kind of like drastic of how much money UCLA puts into law enforcement in a way. And a lot of the times from the stories that we've recorded, it's a lot of Black and brown students who have been targeted from these police people. We don't even call them police. It's just like a really big gray area, which is part of the problem, right? Because we don't want them to have this power when they don't need it. But anyway, I haven't been able to protest just because I have family members who are immunocompromised and are undocumented too. And so going to the hospital is just a no-no in general, because I think we all know the prices of what COVID what a test is, what being in a bedroom in a hospital entails. So it's just like, it's too much money and too much to think about that I have to portray in when I go and protest. But I've been doing some other stuff regarding education and making sure that, you know, my social media on Instagram is constantly updating people. I send a lot of things to students, to high schoolers. I'm in touch with a lot of high schoolers too if they have any questions. But yeah, that's what I've been mobilizing in.
So it sounds like you found ways to support the movement, but also to protect your health and to protect the health of those around you. Okay. And Jeanie has, I have seen things that she's posted on Facebook. Jeanie, her words show a lot of wisdom. And I know that oftentimes as different minority groups are kind of pit against each other. And Jeanie does a really good job of explaining why the Asian community should be supporting this movement. Jeanie, would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, This is a very awkward time because it's COVID, and because of COVID, a lot of Asian people have faced their own racism. And I feel like because of George Floyd and this whole Black Lives Matter movement, some people within my circle in the Asian community want to redirect that conversation. It was like, oh, where was that energy when we were experiencing racism? Or why don't people care about our racism? And I try to educate them about the history of America. Because I think a lot of people, because I identify as a first generation Vietnamese American. So we came here as refugees. We came here with a blank slate. And then the attitudes that they kind of have is, oh, they've been here for hundreds of years. Like, how come they can't mobilize and, get out of poverty and all of that? So they have that attitude that like Black people need to have more agency for themselves. So I try to explain the structural racism to them.
And where did you, how did you kind of develop that? How did you develop understanding the structural racism? And what is the best strategy in reaching the Asian, or in particular the Vietnamese community?
I feel like I wait until someone says something, and then that to me is a signal that's inviting conversation and inviting feedback. Because I feel like they're kind of resistant. So if I tell them or try to feed them information, they'll just not be receptive. So I feel like I wait until they speak and then I'll just respond.
What kind of reactions have you had?
And sorry, what's your other question?
I just want to follow up with that. So, what kind of reactions have you had from family and close friends? Because I think a lot about anti-Black bias in the Latino community, and it sounds like something very similar from what you're going through. So, what's that like when it's close family and friends and you're having that conversation?
I feel like they become defensive and that they take it as a personal attack on their character, and they don't want to be labeled as a racist. So that's kind of one thing to tackle.
Do you feel like you've been able to have some people kind of examine that bias, and have you been able to move any people with your conversations?
Because I realized that they've taken a lifetime to adopt these covert racist ideas. I feel like one conversation or one Facebook post won't change their mind entirely. So I feel like I'm in it for the long haul. I have had people like thank me for challenging their thoughts though. Because a lot of times they just spew things without understanding why, like without having facts to back it up. And that's not okay.
Yeah.
Well, I like how you leave room for growth, and you're planting a seed. You plant the seed, you water, you come back and water it, you let it grow into something, and you're not expecting everything to be understood right away. I mean, I think it's taken 8 years for a lot of white people that weren't necessarily racist, that weren't anti-racist, to kind of understand what Black Lives Matters means. Like to be able to say Black Lives Matters for people that weren't racist, they weren't able to say it until this month, many of them. And so that took 8 years. And so allowing people to grow, I think is good without writing them off right away. Paris, what has been your role in this current Black Lives Matter / current civil rights movement?
Well, I went to a protest. I think like the first major one in San Diego, which is the one in La Mesa. We took over the 8 and the 125. So I was a part of that. I've been speaking out about the topic on like my social media platforms, like clarifying some things and just like letting other people know who are like not Black, like about the situation and like how they can be involved or how they should say things. And I've also been like, you know, just spreading the word and like signing petitions and stuff.
Was that your first protest?
No, for Black Lives Matter movement or just
In general?
No.
Okay, and what moved you? I'm going to ask you a few questions. What moved you to do this protest? As someone who was still in high school, how did you get parental permission? And how can high schoolers, how do you suggest that they get parental permission to be able to do this?
Well, I did it because I was like, well, why not? I mean, it's peaceful. It's a peaceful protest. And my friend also wanted to go. I was like, well, we can just go together and, you know, to see how it goes. So it was pretty good for until the point where until I left, and that's when things got crazy. But yeah, and then I just asked my mom because I'm not a minor anymore. So she's like, you can go ahead. She was actually like encouraged me to go. Because I know she wasn't gonna be able to go, so she encouraged me to go. And then to get other students, for them to get their parents to let them go, that's kind of hard because I know like a lot of students at Preuss, like their parents have a different view on like the situation, so it might be hard to convince them to be like go. But I mean, you know, they can always use their history, you know, their amendments and be like, well, mom, it's my right to go and, you know, stand up for people. And yeah.
Okay. Now, when you just mentioned that things were good and then it turned a little bit. So can you tell us a little bit more about the La Mesa protest?
Yeah, so I left probably around like 3 o'clock. Like when you called me, that's when I left. And like shortly after, probably like an hour after that, when I left, people were at the station at the police department, and they were all just like protesting there, and they were all just guys there. And then I think like an hour or so after that, so once it started getting dark, apparently the police started to throw tear gas and were shooting rubber bullets. Some of my friends were affected by the tear gas, and then that's when they started, I guess the rioting started and people started looting Vons. They set the Chase on fire. They put a fire in Vons. They started a fire in Vons. Some of the other local shops, they looted those stores too. So yeah.
So what would you say provoked when it went from peaceful to using your words, looting and rioting? What made that difference?
Honestly, I'm not really sure because a lot of people say that they were just there protesting and then all of a sudden like they started throwing tear gas. So I'm not really sure because I wasn't there to really determine like that turn of events, but a lot of people were saying like they were just peacefully protesting and then they just started throwing tear gas, like just because. So I don't know. I don't know if it could have been somebody provoked one of the officers and then they just feel like, oh, let's just go and try to get rid of them, but I don't know.
Mr. Ramos, could you tell us a little bit of history about interracial biases and prejudice, colonialism, and how that can kind of lead to ethnicities not supporting each other in the United States?
I mean, it goes so deep and it goes so far back. I mean, you talk about European colonialism in North America, whether it was British or Spanish in Central America, and Europeanness has always been held as the pinnacle of what you can be. And there's been a sense of anti-Blackness, anti-Indigenousness baked into the culture in Latin America and the United States. And so for a lot of immigrants that come to the United States who are people of color, they are also invested in white supremacy in whatever form it took in their countries. So you have a lot of people of color who come to the United States, and as immigrants, a lot of people say, well, I didn't have a hand in creating the inequality in the United States, the racism here. But immigrants are pretty quick to show up to a country and figure out the formal and the informal rules of how things work. So, you know, you have a lot of Mexican immigrants who come in and they figure out who's at the bottom of the hierarchy, and it's Black people in the United States. And so they'll teach their kids, you know, which kind of culture to avoid. You know, for my parents, it was, you know, don't listen to rap, you know, and they couldn't articulate it, but it was pretty clear it was associated with Black people. And that was something that they didn't want for us. They sort of saw themselves as trying to keep the wrong culture from infiltrating the house. And as kids grow up, you get subtle messages about, you know, what kind of people you should be friends with and who you shouldn't be friends with. And for, I think, US born children of immigrants, I think it's on us as we learn the history of the United States, and the way that Black people, Indigenous people have been oppressed, that we have to then educate our families and communities to re-educate ourselves about how it works. Decolonize our mentality is kind of one of those catchphrases of the age, but it's a lot of work, because there is a lot of bias against Black people, and with Mexicans it's because you know, there aren't as many Black people in Mexico, and so it's a whole separate racial group. You can be a Caribbean Latino who is also of African descent and still be anti-Black. And so it expresses itself in different forms, but ultimately what they have in common is that we've been brainwashed for centuries to think of Europeanness as the height, the most attainable thing that you can be. And that creates divisions in moments like this, when there are a lot of Latinos who might be invested in hopefully graduating into whiteness. There's some that can do that more easily than others, and they may not want to you know, recreate the whole system when they're on the brink of benefiting from it. And so I think it's a moment where we have to work on our own community people to see that we have to reimagine something new, and not just hope to be the ones benefiting from the same oppression that we've had for a long time.
One of the reasons that I wanted América to be here is because I remember in 8th grade, she told a story, which is really interesting given the dynamic of her family. Do you mind sharing that story, América?
Yeah, of course. I remember I was in 8th grade and I began to develop a crush on a Black friend that I had, and I didn't know how to tell my parents because, like Mr. Ramos said, like they had like submissively told me who to hang out with or who to date. My parents would tell me like, oh, you should think about dating a rich white man. He can like maintain you and he can do, and I'm like thinking, how come my parents think this way? How come they're really like forcing this upon me? Or sometimes they would say like, oh, you should not be dating you know, people from a lower income, try and like look when you go to college for higher income. And I was only in 8th grade at the time, and I was just like, how do I explain to my parents that I like a Black guy? Because they're submissively always telling me like not to, you know, and it was just a really conflicting time because I knew that I liked him, and I didn't know if my parents were going to be like accepting of it. So I had like asked Mr. Carr, because I knew Mr. Carr had a Latina, I don't know, fiance at the time, but a partner, Latina partner. So I was just like, okay, Mr. Carr, like, how do you do this? Like, how can I bring up conversation and navigate through this, knowing that my parents are pretty open-minded in a lot of other things, right? My mom is queer. My dad practices different religions than most Mexicans do. You know, so it's just like really complicated for me to understand that, like, how come my parents were thinking about this, and how I didn't think that way. You know, I didn't think it was a problem at all. But yeah, I remember being super confused as to if I should or didn't. But it's 8th grade, you know, you get over a crush in like a week. So I don't remember what I did, but I do remember now having these conversations about Black Lives Matter and protests and everything. I call out a lot of my family members. I have no shame. Everybody knows me that if they have a question, they are able to ask me, and I will educate, and I will bring up other conversations. Because I was actually talking to this about my dad, like, how come we don't talk about racism in like the dinner table? And my dad says that a lot of the times it's because there isn't that conversation in general in Mexican news outlets. A lot of it has to do with the colorism that exists in Mexico, anti-indigenous, anti-blackness. There's just like a lot to dissect, right? And that's why my dad acknowledges that he did wrong too at that time. Like, I recently just brought it up because Mr. Carr told me about it. And then I asked my mom too, and she's like, she doesn't remember apparently that she went through that. But I just bring it up that like that was not okay, and that I hope that like she's moved on and grown from that mentality. And you know, I hope she has. I've been home for a little bit, so I don't know. But yeah, I hope that these new conversations are helping them grow consciousness.
That conversation, I remember I was taken aback because I'm like, wait, your mom has a female partner, and your dad, I think your dad was married, or he at least, and your dad had a female partner. So I'm like, you have 3 moms and 1 dad, and they don't want you to date a black guy? So I was taken aback that they were so accepting on in one area, and your parents got along really well, supported you really well at school, and it was like a great example of a different family dynamic that was really supportive and loving. And so that was one of those things that stuck with me as an educator. So thank you for sharing that. And it's good to hear that those conversations still happen, and that they're all growing. Because if you want to tear down cultures, then you have to tear them down to make them in your image. So if the conquistadors, or if the conquerors are trying to make you conform to their way of life, then you do things like use the word savages, and you tell them that they are ugly for looking the way that they are, and make an ideal of beauty that is what you want them to be. Jeanie, could you talk a little bit about, because there's definitely colonialism happened in Asia as well, and there's the idea of lighter versus darker Asians, and then also the newer immigrants and the term fob. Anything you'd like to add about that?
Yeah, so Vietnam was colonized by France. My family comes from education, so they knew multiple languages like French, Japanese. And I definitely know that Asian Americans try to disassociate themselves with fobs. So that's fresh off the boat. And those are the new immigrants, that people that come here with accents. So sorry, I'm like, I don't know what else you know about that.
Well, and I've seen like one of the most popular surgeries in, I want to say Korea, is eyelid surgery.
Oh yes, and in Vietnam too, we have a lot of those. My mom actually has, like, she got a nose job to make her nose thinner and her eyelids bigger as well.
And so,
but yeah, Western beauty standards definitely infiltrates Asian cultures. And we do have products that make our skin lighter.
And so these same beauty standards have permeated throughout the world. And,
yes.
And it's basically saying that the way you look should be changed to look like someone else. And it is steering towards a common vision. I will say social media has definitely helped to control beauty standards, or helped to develop different beauty standards. I know that Black women have been wearing their hair more naturally. And I think that Instagram has helped that, because beauty secrets are shared, and style is developed, and individuals are kind of creating style. I know that different body types are now becoming more popular. It is amazing that everyone now wants black lips, meaning full lips, and that there are some of the most popular surgery or medical beauty procedures are to have lips like mine. And
Are you bragging? Are you bragging?
it's all natural, baby. It's all natural. I didn't have to get stung in order for to get this look, or put my mouth in the Kylie Jenner challenge, whatever that thing was. I think that was the thing for like 5 years ago. So it's just interesting how now that social media has given the power to individuals, individuals can kind of set the standard for beauty, and they can appreciate who they are, and others now want to be like them. What about, have you seen Black people talking about each other for either being light skin or dark skin, or natural hair versus processed? I don't know if that's the right word.
Oh, so you're just talking about like in general within this, not the Black Lives Matter movement, right? Yeah, so there's like colorism. I think that's kind of within like all minorities, because of, you know, the white race. They have put so much influence into like standards, and like, you know, made the minorities seem like, oh well, you would be better if you're lighter, because, you know, you'll be closer to the white person who's superior or whatever. So I think that happens like a lot in the Black community. I mean, a lot of minorities too, because I know in like the Latino or Hispanic community that happens too, especially like in Southern America. I know a lot of people are like, if you're lighter, you know, it's better. That colorism, that also goes into, you know, what you were saying, like the hair texture and stuff. Like if your hair is like curly, or if, you know, if your hair is like coily, then it's like worse. They see it as nappy, or, you know, things like that.
A couple of questions. First question is, if you have to pick one of your identities, today we did a lot about talking about the intersection of different identities. We talked about, we talked about a lot, but if you had to choose one identity, and I only let you use one label for yourself, which one are you taking?
First gen. I feel like first gen.
First generation?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I would say first generation of graduating high school, and first generation in college. Yeah, those are like one of the main ones. Yeah, that I hold close.
Jeanie, what is your label?
Can I say Asian American? No?
Yes.
I have to pick one?
No, that's
Okay.
that's a label. That's one label.
Okay. Asian American.
Okay. So you're forgetting about not Vietnamese American?
I don't really feel like I identify too much with my Vietnamese roots, but yeah, Asian American. Because
Okay.
I feel like I always struggle with that. I feel like I'm not Asian enough because I don't speak my own language, and I'm not American enough because they'll always see me as other.
So you found where those two intersect, and that's where you are.
Yes.
Okay. What one label are you going to choose?
Can I use human?
Yes, you may.
Is that label? Then I'll use that.
Okay. That sounds kind of easy though, kind of all lives matter-ish, but cool, I'll take it.
I mean, at the end of the day, because when you use those other labels, it like creates the division between people. So if you use human, I mean, yeah. I mean, I understand. Okay, see, I'm not about to get into it, but yeah.
Well, no, you're defending your place. Mr. Ramos has been doing this amazing breadvolution during quarantine times, where he's making. Can you tell us a little bit about the bread and how it's come along, sir?
Oh, geez. I should connect it to something. You know, when my wife was pregnant, and we were still in Texas back then, And we were thinking about, the coming of our son, and, I grew up in an immigrant household where my mom cooked from scratch. Everything was from scratch. Processed food was, again, one of those terrible American cultural, um, things that she wanted to block from the house. And so it really sort of pushed me to learn how to cook well, because I want my son to eat well. And one of those things for me was making bread. I learned that you can make bread very easily, and I really gotten into it. So yeah, with this quarantine, I've been baking up a storm. So yeah, I've got my sourdough starter. I'm one of those people that have a sourdough starter. I didn't start with the quarantine. I'll defend myself. I had one in San Diego. So I was on the sourdough starter train, before it was cool, and yeah, I love it. I love being able to cook from scratch. I love having my son eat good food, have him participate in it, and it's something that we share. So yeah, it's been one of those things that I've done to help keep myself sane, and I love seeing my son eat the things I make. So yeah, that's a source of a lot of happiness here.
Okay. What about you, America? What have you been doing to feed your spirit during this quarantine time? You're stuck in the house. You're taking walks. You develop a new hobby. What are you doing?
So I got a puppy. Pre-quarantine, I got a puppy around February. And that has just been taking up a lot of my time. I realized that growing up, my parents didn't I didn't take care of the dog. It was my parents. And now that I'm officially taking care of a dog, it's hardcore.
That's funny. Okay. And Jeanie, what about you? What have you been doing to beat boredom and feed the soul during this time?
I've taught myself how to cook. I've made a couple of Vietnamese dishes. I learned how to make John Legend's fried chicken. That's really easy and tasty to make. I broke my foot right before quarantine, so I was quarantining before quarantine. So I've been working out as much as I can now that I can.
There you go. Okay. Well, sounds like we are all doing things, and we're gonna leave quarantine with more skills than we had before. I've actually been cooking more myself, more cooking like inside. Men like to cook on the grill, but because it's like the manly thing to do. But I've been doing more cooking inside and been cooking almost every day. Also, I am paying way too much attention to the stock market because there's no sports. And I need something to like pay attention to. Well, also because I think it's right now as far down as it's going to go for the next decade probably. So now's the time to like jump on board. So those are the things, the skills I will come out of quarantine with, besides this amazing skill of being able to use Zoom. So I'll be a better teacher. So yeah, coming out of quarantine successfully. Have you developed a skill in quarantine, Paris?
I've done a couple things. I've learned how to do Senegalese twists. I learned how to do passion twists on my hair because obviously I can't go somewhere to get it done. So I just learned from YouTube how to do it. What else? I learned how to do like cartoon outlines. So my sister has been asking me to make cartoons of her. That's been kind of stressful. I took a break from it because I'm like, I got stuff to do, but on my off time I do that. And I'd be bored, and so I find stuff in my closet to like turn around and change to a different outfit. So I've been kind of teaching myself how to sew.
Okay.
And I guess, oh yeah, cooking. Like I made a no-bake cheesecake. That was good.
Okay. So sounds like quarantine's been great for you.
Kind of, sort of.
Last question. Hopefully you saw our demo episode of our first class for Kneeling and Healing before we even had the name. I need to know, are you keeping your friends like me on social media? Or are you unfriending them if you feel that they don't have your best interests based off of their political views, like Mr. Ramos? Go ahead, América.
I'm not keeping my friends. I'm sorry. They're not my friends anymore.
You can't trust them, right?
Yeah, it's not just that. It's just like Mr. Ramos said during the episode. I brought you to my house. You know, I gave you my mom's food. You know all about my family and what I'm doing. And it's just like I've provided enough discourse for you to maybe understand as to why, you know? So none of that. Sorry.
All right, Jeanie, what about you?
I keep them. Generally, my close friends, we share like the same opinions, but acquaintances, that's where, or family members, that's where it can get tricky. But I try to keep them. Like you said, I try to plant the seed and see where it goes, because I like to have different perspectives.
Let me just say, I think both approaches are necessary. I think people they need both of you to guide them along, but also think people need to understand that they can really screw up in ways that they can't fix. And so it's good that they have both types in their lives, and I think both approaches are necessary right now.
Yes, and I mean, they're still not going to get my mama's food. I think that's definitely crossing the line. No mom food. Yeah. But you know, you can stay on social media. I think that works. Are you with Mr. Ramos in unfriending people on social media that don't seem to value your same values or seem like a threat to your values? Or are you like me where you want to keep them along and maybe they'll come around?
I don't really know. Maybe, I don't know, because I see people who have different views. So I'm probably leaning more towards your side, Mr. Carr, because I, like the other day, somebody said something on their story and I like replied to them. And like, basically I was trying to like have them understand like why their comment wasn't the best. So I think, I mean, well, it's different because they were my friend kind of. So like, I'd rather educate them and like tell them what's wrong and like how they can better articulate their words rather than just like, oh, boop, you're not my friend, like on that. If it gets to the point where they're just not understanding and I'm getting really mad, I'll probably unfriend them. But yeah.
Okay.